So welcome everyone to the candidate forum for the Milwaukee County Board 3rd District race between incumbent supervisor Sheldon Wasserman and challenger Eric Rorholm. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You are good. That's
Okay, good.
We'll never get it right.
So the forum is sponsored by Historic Water Tower Neighborhood and Murray Hill Neighborhood Association. Partners include Cambridge Woods Neighborhood Association, Lake Park Friends, Mariners Neighborhood Association, and the Downer Avenue, East Side, and Oakland Avenue Business Improvement Districts. And I want to recognize the 3 gentlemen who put this event together: Kevin Walczak, president of Murray Hill Neighborhood Association, and Patrick Fennelly and Jeff Bentoff, who serve as president and vice president, respectively, of Historic Water Tower Neighborhood. So we're going to start just giving the candidates, and each time they'll get a minute and 45 seconds. And the first question will be to ask each candidate to talk about why they are running and why we should vote for them for county supervisor. And Eric, you begin.
Oh, totally. Well, thanks so much, first of all, for having us, all the neighborhood associations and bids that put this together. My name is Eric Rorholm. There's been a lot of creative spellings and pronunciations, which I'm sure I'll joke about throughout tonight. I'm a theater artist. I build sets and I do scenic painting. I can actually sew. I make costumes and such. That's a little bit my thing. But I became very politically active during the Trump administration. Specifically, the issue of child separation pushed me into the fray. I'm a renter. I am a wage worker. I am part of the working class. I was a security guard briefly towards the end of last year in order to, just pay basic living expenses. And I was an essential worker when the pandemic began. The pandemic began with my supervisor calling me in because of where I had just flown. I actually immediately lost 2 weeks of work right off the bat. And I know that experience is very common. Lots of folks have shared that with me about the loss of income that they have taken because of the pandemic, the horrible loss of life, the loss of economic stability, and now, of course, the rising cost of housing and the rising cost of living, really. I have lots of concerns that are county specific. I was a Black Lives Matter protester, and anybody who was out in those streets remembered that the sheriffs went above and beyond to intimidate us. It was a huge issue to the First Amendment as far as racial justice goes. And I'm very concerned about our parks and the deferred maintenance that they have been suffering from. And I really worry that privatization is a huge threat to our beloved park system. So I'm really excited to be with y'all here tonight and talking about all these really important issues.
Thank you. Sheldon?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me tonight. I definitely want to thank also Kevin Walczak from the Murray Hill Neighborhood Association, Patrick Fennelly and Jeff Bentoff, Historic Water Tower Trust. I always call it trust, but the Neighborhood Association. You guys do great work. I'm proud to be a member of both of your organizations and to also be members of the other organizations. Some of the other organizations have been listed. I also want to thank you, Bruce Murphy, for moderating. Your history and your dedication for Milwaukee County is really legendary. You're the one who broke the pension scandal and what that exposed at the time, and it continues to haunt Milwaukee County. So I want to thank you for your service to our community. I also want to, at this time, have a quick moment that I think we also have to recognize Ukraine and what's taking place there. Here, people they're losing their lives, they're being murdered, they're being killed, their homes are being destroyed. And we live in Wisconsin. We live in this great environment of democracy, where my opponent and I can have a face-to-face as much as possible discussion on Zoom, and we can discuss in our safe environments in our homes a democracy and what democracy means. I'm committed to Milwaukee County. I've been committed to the state. I served in the Wisconsin State Legislature for 14 years. I've been on the county board for 6 years, and I'm also a physician. I'm an OBGYN physician and been an essential healthcare worker. And those dark days when COVID started, my concern for my patients and a concern for our community, what we're going to face with, really was front and center to the world that I saw. So thank you for having me tonight. I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you. So we have many questions submitted by folks from the neighborhoods, but to get things started, I just thought we might want a question that helps explain the challenges that every county politician will face. Milwaukee County's property tax is capped by the state, and it faces a growing structural deficit that is projected by 2027 to leave it spending 100% of its revenue on state mandated services, with not $1 left to spend on local services like the parks, the buses, and that sort of thing. So Sheldon, we'll begin with you. What is your strategy for how the county should deal with this challenge?
Well, the challenge is absolutely mind-boggling. Those numbers are real. It's a disaster coming. But let's just talk about how we got in this situation. Let's look at historically what happened. It all goes back to shared revenue. We were the first state in the United States that came up with income tax, and the governor and the legislature at the time said that we are going to create shared revenue. So we are going to give money to all communities and municipalities around the state, share the revenue from the wealthy to give to the poor, and to really spread the wealth out so communities could have services for their districts. That trust, that understanding was broken in the last 15, 20 years, where shared revenue did not go up. The legislature and the governors at the time decided, why don't we just spend it for what we want to do? Why don't we just spend it on our projects and our concerns? Let's take credit for it. And the problem came in is, what do the communities do? So we got squeezed. We got squeezed terribly, and everywhere else around the state got squeezed. We don't have revenue. So what we're left with is a situation where do we get it? So when I looked at and I surveyed my district, a 1% sales tax was the only way we can creatively come up with something, a wheel tax, a sales tax, to come up with some money for us. And right now, a state senator, a Republican state senator, is coming up with this grand bargain that we're looking at as really the only way we can come up with revenue. But unless we come up with revenue from either a sales tax or from shared revenue, we're in trouble.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, well, respectfully, I would really disagree with your characterization there. I really appreciate the background. The reality is that the far-right GOP legislators in Madison have a bone to pick with Milwaukee County, and hurting us is feeding into their ideological goal, right? And I'm going to be really, really pragmatic and realistic and say that negotiating with the far-right state legislature that's really taking us hostage in a lot of ways is not going to yield results. And those budget constraints are very, very real. But I will also acknowledge that the county has a budget of over $1.3 billion, and that is not a small chunk of change. The reality is a lot of that money, in fact, almost half, is being punted at the sheriff's office right now. And I saw firsthand, and I know with the work that the sheriffs do, they are beholden to taking care of our parks, patrolling our parks and patrolling our freeways. And really that is for the most part it. I know that they do things in the court system as well, and it's really important to keep those positions staffed, but we are hemorrhaging money right now on the sheriff system. We are spending so much money on tear gas and batons and riot shields, weapons of war, and that has real costs. It has real costs, not just for the fact that, for example, us as a Black Lives Matter movement were shown all kinds of violence and intimidation, particularly on the freeways where it was the most severe, but that has real costs for our park system, for example. It has real costs for our transit system. It's part of why we have been sitting on this deferred maintenance for over 2 decades. So first and foremost, pulling money away from the sheriff's department in a very targeted way is the #1 way that we have on the ground right now in order to make people's lives better and invest in the things that they really, really care about. We also need to be working as hard as possible to create a dedicated funding source for parks. I mean, that's not state mandated, so that's part of why it's the first thing to go. And it's really ridiculous. Parks are so important for us. They reduce crime, they give us clean air, they give us green spaces, free spaces for people to connect with their communities and enjoy the outdoors. These are really important, and we need to be investing in them.
Thank you. So next question for Eric. What is your vision for Milwaukee's lakefront? In your answer, you might talk about whether you favor any development on the lakefront. Are there new ways to maximize its recreational potential? And can we get lifeguards and clean water back?
Absolutely. This is a great question. I'm a young person. I love Bradford Beach. It's my favorite of Milwaukee County's park system. And I was actually very worried and nervous, actually, to learn of the attempted privatization of our beach. I know that my opponent might not categorize it exactly that way, but the reality is that it's a private vendor that is charging and making a profit off of, very importantly, that bathhouse, and there are plans to expand that, and that is part of a concerted effort too, because everyone in Milwaukee County knows the beach is a huge destination and draw spot for people all across Milwaukee County, and there is a very real effort to try and restrict access to the beach to people who live immediately around there, and everyone who lives here knows that that means very wealthy white people, and that's a really disturbing precedent. We need to be making sure that our lakefront is accessible and open to everyone. This is another reason that I was running, is I'm very concerned about air pollution. I'm very concerned about water pollution. I'm very concerned about the health of our environment in general. The climate crisis is here and it's real, and it's not going away anytime soon. And our entire shoreline is in danger as long as we are refusing to act. So on one level, I would completely emphatically reject privatization as a solution to any of the park's budget woes, for one thing. But I would also say that as we have our broader vision for what our park system should look like and who it should be serving all of us. It should be serving the most marginalized. It should be serving working people who don't have the means necessarily to be spending money in for-profit venues all the time. And we need to be very conscious about the role that our park system plays in our quality of life, and for our environment and for our economy.
Thank you. Sheldon?
Well, I want to correct a couple things that were said. First of all, our budget for county budget is at $1.28 billion this year, but only $48.8 million went to the sheriff's budget. It wasn't half the budget. So fundamentally, that's a wrong number. 48.8, 1.28 billion total budget. So our sheriff's budget is a small little pittance on the whole thing. Now, I'm sure we'll talk about sheriff's budget, because I support the sheriffs. I don't want to defund the sheriff's budget. I think I support the deputies. I support the role that they have. And to protect our beaches, we need to have some sheriff's deputies there. So, well, I guess we'll talk about that later, but I want to get right away to the issue of privatization of Bradford Beach. That is absolutely and cannot happen. It's almost ludicrous. The Wisconsin Constitution has in the Constitution the public doctrine of all open waterways are free and open to the public. What we do have at Bradford Beach is we have an open beach for all citizens, all colors, all races, all socioeconomic classes. It's open to everybody. Now, what do we have? We do have the docks. It's a Chicago firm that came in and contracted with the Milwaukee County Park System to run the tiki huts, to run the amenities, where people want to buy food. A lot of people don't want to bring their own food there. So they want amenities, they can buy food, they can get a drink. And real quickly, I have to add, we are not, and I'll make the big announcement tonight, the docks are not going to be building a restaurant on the second story of Bradford Beach. It's not going to happen. They're all going to fix the beach and we're going to be fine with it. No privatization. It's not happening.
Okay. So I had a question on the sheriff's department. Well, we kind of covered that and maybe we can get back to it later. Let's go on to the county parks. I'm leading off with you, Sheldon. So the county parks were once the glory of Milwaukee and now are suffering from decades of deferred maintenance. On the other hand, they have begun to earn some revenue through the addition of beer gardens and efforts to maximize revenue at golf courses. What would be your approach to both saving and trying to improve the parks, Sheldon?
Well, thanks for the question. I'm very honored. This last 2 years, I was honored with my appointment as chair of the Parks, Energy, and Environment Committee and chair. And during that time, I've learned a lot about our parks. And one of the things I learned most importantly is the deferred maintenance and the tragedy that's really affecting us. We have $400 million of deferred maintenance. To get the Lake Park Bridge was to beg, borrow, and steal anything so we could get that thing done. It's a terrible situation. And it all comes down to, once again, we don't have our revenue. We don't have shared revenue. We're not getting our fair share. We have to get it somewhere. The public demands and the public should expect the jewel of the public of our public to be able to go to the park system, to work in the parks, and to play in the parks, and to enjoy that time. But we're not getting it. So what we have to do is we have to get some revenue. We have to get some lifeguards on the beach. I mean, I'm completely in agreement. I work to raise the lifeguard fees and to their salaries to get them on the beaches. We also have a big problem with McKinley Beach. We just have a water safety study, what we're going to do there. We had 4 drownings last year. You know, the problems go on and on, but we need revenue where revenues start, and we can argue with the Republicans and Mass and all that we want, or we can do something about it. I say be practical. Let's solve the problem. Let's get the crown jewel of Milwaukee, our park system, up to the first-class status that they deserve.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, well, I would love to know what you mean by solve the problem, because I mean, rehash, fighting with the Republicans in Madison is not going to put Milwaukee County first. And I don't think that any Milwaukee County person wants to be on the chopping block again to give even more concessions to, you know, Republicans in Madison. And I appreciate the budget correction. And part of why I appreciate that is that the city does spend so much on policing, which is part of why the funding that is going to the sheriff, the super opaque, by the way, budget, they're regularly going over budget with no regular accountability to the board. And I'm so happy to hear about your enthusiasm with repairing our parks. I do know that there was an amendment that Supervisor Clancy put forth that would move some money into repairing the Mitchell Park domes, that would have moved money away from the sheriff's department. You voted against that amendment, which I was very much in support of. And this is sort of my argument, is that the money is there, it's just not being well allocated. And the reality is that, back to the sales tax piece in the first question, asking working class people to fork up even more of their paychecks in order to pay for that is just not realistic. It's going to further the economic inequality we have right now. And let us all remember that because of those same Republicans, the minimum wage right now is $7.25. So it takes political will. It will take some hard decision making on the board. I appreciate the improvement to the Lake Park Bridge. The article that you shared said the 2.5 million of that was already there. You only had to fight for the last million. I appreciate that you did. I love Lake Park very much. But the reality is that people in this district are incredibly passionate about our park system, about the trails, about Bradford Beach, about the domes, about our entire park system. And they deserve someone who's going to fight really vigorously for the parks. And I'm sorry, I just don't feel that you have done that for our park system. I'd be remiss if I didn't add that it was the sewer socialists of the early 20th century who gave us our park system. And as a proud democratic socialist, you can count on me to fight for parks first and foremost all the time.
Thank you. So question on the county transit goes first to Eric.
Sure.
So the county transit system has faced years of funding shortfalls and declining ridership.
Yep.
Would you favor increasing fares or cutting routes or some other approach? And how does the county BRT line, bus rapid transit line, and city streetcar fit into your future vision of transit in Milwaukee?
Oh, that's a great question. And there's a lot in there, so I'll try and get through it very, very quickly. Raising fares and cutting routes is fundamentally not a sustainable answer. That will just ultimately make the transit service even less accessible and bring in even less people who are afford to ride it in the frickin' first place. That's a non-starter right there. I'm very concerned with the number of routes that have already been cut, most recently some of the freeway flyer routes. I'm very concerned again that this effort to contract with Via and with Uber and to fill in intermediaries with private corporations is paving a path toward privatization. And that's scary, right? In this era where corporate control over our democracy is only greater and greater, it's not crazy for me to see a future in which we completely lose public transit. And I don't want that to happen. So that's number one. A big issue I know is the inability to retain bus drivers. And I can completely imagine why. The wages are not fantastic. It's incredibly irregular work. The operators definitely have a difficult job on their hands. So I think one of the most important things is to be working with the union, to be making sure that wages and working conditions are good so that it can attract drivers that actually power the thing in the first place. So that's number one. And empowering workers and making sure that that system really works is really the priority. And that again connects back to the streetcar. I'm very concerned about a private corporation's control over that contract. I would very much like them to be operated by MTS as well, so that the county board does have some direct control over the streetcar. I think that it connected areas that didn't necessarily need to be connected. I think that there were better ways that the streetcar could have gone. Regardless, it's here. We have a duty to integrate it into our transit plan. And again, we need to be funding these services. The transit system is one of the most important ways that working class people even get back to work. And I mean, in this era right now where people are talking about not enough people working, the unemployment rate being too low, let's make it easy for folks. We definitely,
Thank you.
by the way, did I go over time?
No, it's all right. Thanks, Eric. Sheldon.
First of all, when we start talking transit, I think we really have to talk about the frontline worker who really is an essential worker. Those bus drivers who put their lives on the line every day that they drive on some of these routes really get full credit from me. I also want to talk about the transportation system and our bus system. I took a tour of where they fix these buses and how they repair them, and the central office on Fond du Lac Avenue. And I'll tell you, I've taken a lot of tours, both on state level tours and county tours, but I have been so impressed with the transit department. They fabricate their own, when a bus is damaged, they fabricate their own materials, their own body shapes, they work on their engines. I mean, we have such a first-class transit system. It's really a model for the rest of the nation. It's so functional. I really give full credit to from everyone, from the lines all the way up to the administrator. Now let's just talk about the budget. Let's talk about where we're going with it. Right now, for 2022 and for 2023, there are no cuts in service. We're also not going to be raising fares at all. But what we do have, and the reason why that's not going to happen, is because we have the CARES Act and we have ARPA funding. This money is going to cover us. The problem comes up is what's going to happen in 2024. So I agree, we've got to drive ridership. We got to increase ridership. Ridership doesn't pay the whole fare. And everybody knows that transportation and bus systems are subsidized. But I'm very concerned about 2024. But once again, it's a revenue crisis, and we've got to get revenue any way we can.
Thank you. Next question goes to you, Sheldon. The county board has just voted to provide $45 million for a new facility for the Milwaukee Public Museum. Meanwhile, the county has a lot of unmet needs, including a shortage of beds for youth at the Vel Phillips Juvenile Facility. Sheldon, you voted for this funding. Can you talk about your reasoning on that?
Yes. Milwaukee County Museum was about to lose its accreditation. We are months away from losing our accreditation. If we lose the accreditation, we lose the ability to have traveling tours. We lose the ability to have interchange of museum items. We lose our touring. We lose educational funding. We would lose national grants to our museum, and it becomes very problematic. The building right now it's in is falling apart. The basement is flooding. Our collection, which is owned by Milwaukee County residents, is being damaged. And there's a time and a place where we have to move on. And all the studies, we did studies on it. Should we repair the building or we move somewhere else? We decided on moving somewhere else. So to 6th and McKinley. Any world-class city has to have a world-class museum, and it's part of our civilization. The state of Wisconsin granted us $40 million. We're kicking in $45 million. It's our collection. We are spending money on this, but we have it's a historic museum. We also, and this is where it really becomes a bigger issue with the domes that we could talk about later when the question comes up, is we're also raising $130 million of private funds coming up from corporations, from individuals. So this is once again, this really the private public partnership that we can get things accomplished. So it's $45 million is a huge amount of money, but we need the museum. We've had a museum for years and we need it for the future generation. So I support it, and I'm proud that we signed it, and it was signed into law by by County Executive Crowley, and I'm all for it.
Thank you. Eric, how would you have voted on that?
Sure. So I'm a theater artist. I'm someone who really believes in the power of arts and cultural institutions. So as much as we can be making art more accessible and culture more accessible, I think that's a really good thing. For that exact reason, I had a lot of concerns about this specific maneuver by the board. The fact that the process was very last minute, it was very rushed. A lot of very key answers were not questioned, or a lot of key questions were not answered. For example, the CEO of the public museum has not openly said that they will recognize the union that their workers are working under because it is transitioning from one institution to another. In doing that, the union must recertify. In doing that, they're also losing the term public from the museum, which is something that I noticed my opponent did not talk about. I'm under the impression that they are raising costs as well and not increasing the subsidy for others as well. This is going in the Halyard Park area. I understand that the neighborhood association has expressed some excitement, some positivity. Nonetheless, I have real concerns about gentrification. And that said, I mean, it's just really ridiculous to me that we're flicking $45 million away without a whole lot of questions being answered, when just one answer ago, the answer was that the county was so cash strapped that we couldn't possibly take care of our parks. That's really frustrating to me. And what we have done is really quickly, lost all our accountability by giving away that money right now to this institution that is private right now. And I assure they do really excellent work. And I agree that having a strong public museum is really, really important for a strong city like Milwaukee and for a strong county like Milwaukee County. But I had real concerns about that process. And I worry that workers were not listened to. I'm worried that the community was not listened to. And we've also now been left with, you were right, a $200+ million project to repair the building it was already in, rather than just repairing that. So you have also now given the county a $200+ million rehabilitation project that we're now in charge of doing something with.
So next question on Ravine Road in Lake Park. It's been closed. And of course, that's in this district. It's been closed for more than 8 years because of structural problems with the historic concrete pedestrian bridge. When the repairs are finally completed, should the road be reopened to cars or converted to a trail instead? Eric.
Well, I will admit this will be my least intellectual answer of the entire day. I really enjoy Lake Park. I think that any opportunity that we have to make infrastructure less dominant on cars and more dominant on human beings, I definitely think that that's a positive. I have some concerns about how reopening that road would also screw with traffic along Lincoln Memorial Drive. I'm movable on this issue, but I think that keeping it closed has actually been really nice. And I am, the reason for that is that because I think that the lakefront needs to be as accessible as possible for people, right? More so than vehicles. Our county park system needs to be aimed at taking care of human beings. And if we can have a corridor where there's not car exhaust coming out that folks are able to walk through, I think that that's an important thing. I yield my time.
Thank you. Sheldon?
Thank you. Well, I have to tell you, of all the questions that I've been asked during this campaign and for the last several years, nothing has been more heated and more anger provoking among neighbors and from what I've seen is this question. This is the hot issue. What should we do with the road when the bridge is done? Now, I've been doing polling on this because I might have my own viewpoints, but at the same time, it's the district elects me, the district represents, the district is what I represent and what do I want? So the polls have been really consistent over the years. About 60% of the population wants to have the road closed permanently against automobiles. They want pedestrians, they want bicyclists, and they want a walkway. We also have 17%, just checking my numbers real quick, about 17% want it open for vehicles. They want the vehicles to be just like it used to be. And there is the other percentage, about 17, 18, depending on which numbers, to get my 100%, that want a hybrid. Lake Park Friends, which is really a critical group, voted about a year ago to come up with a hybrid approach. I am looking at hybrid. It really answers the questions for everybody. We also have to look at how much it costs that road to be rebuilt, because the company that's fixing the bridge right now has done damage to the road. The road has not been used for years. It's a big question. Right now I'm leaning on hybrid, but the most important thing is finish the bridge, then let's work on the road.
Thank you. Next question. Milwaukee County is projecting a $6 million deficit this year for the Milwaukee County Department of Health and Human Services because of the increasing cost of sending juveniles to state correction facilities. The average cost per juvenile per year is $420,000. What can be done to reduce costs and yet take care of this need? Sheldon.
Yeah. You know, I sat in Health and Human Needs the other day, and it's a tragedy. The cost that's being imposed on us to send, the youth from Milwaukee to, Lincoln Hills, which we've tried to shut down, which we've talked about shutting down for years. And finally, the legislature's kicked in some money. They're not just talking; they're actually putting money into trying to bring these youth home to reduce their costs. But we have a tragedy on our hands. COVID has caused tremendous upheaval and trauma to families, to education, where kids were not in school, where they were not allowed to work, to socialize with their friends. And some districts had openings, but they weren't allowed to socialize. It's caused damage. And when you have unstable families and families that have severe needs and wants, that cannot give full service to their children, let alone places where youth can just blow off steam are not available, we have a problem. And we're seeing what's taking place right now. There are no simple answers. We have to put more money into resources. We need more youth programs. We need to look at that way. But at the same time, there is going to be an element of youth that need to have their lives turned around. We need to have facilities that we can protect the public and also protect these individuals from themselves. So there are no easy answers there. We need a sheriff's department, but we also need social workers. We need schools. We need churches. We need religious communities to come together. We need a village to really change these lives and put our youth into a proper healthy future dimensions.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't think that dangerous youth are the biggest threat to Milwaukee County folks. And thank you so much for this question. I think this is a really phenomenal opportunity to talk about the sickness that is mass incarceration. And the premise for this exact question is based off of it. I mean, these institutions and the process of mass incarceration, they cost so much money. They isolate people, in this specific case, children, from their families. There was a comment that it was exactly correct. I'm very concerned about the condition of anyone in Milwaukee County's care, whether that's on the jail side or the House of Correction side. And lastly, this would be exactly the perfect place, the fiscally responsible place to be putting extra money that we're taking away from the Sheriff's Department, because investments in mental health are huge. They are the thing that is actually proven to bring down crime. They are the thing that is proven to bring families back together. And I'm really glad that I heard you talking about that and putting people on the right path, because recently there was the issue of really expensive video visitation, because visitation is banned from Milwaukee County facilities. It's costing working families an average of $1,600 a year to so much as talk to a mom or a dad or a brother or an uncle. And Supervisor Wasserman voted no on exactly that. And that's exactly the kind of program that is a private monopoly, a corporation that's extracting this wealth out of our county, out of our people. It's costing us huge. And the reality is it's not making us any safer either. So I would say that mental health investments are absolutely top of my priority list. They deliver more dollar for dollar. They make us safer. They make us a better, healthier, more sustainable community. And they make sure that Milwaukee County is a place where people can get down on their luck and get help instead of getting incarcerated.
Thank you. So next question for Eric, on the Mitchell Park domes.
Yes.
They badly need renovation and the price tag for this is very high. There have been calls to shut them down. There have been calls to expand their impact with other additional amenities.
Sure.
And others have said, spend what it takes just to maintain them as is. What would
Sure.
be your vision for that?
Well, the domes are
and Mitchell Park, sorry.
Yeah. So the domes are incredibly important. A unique gem among the Milwaukee County Park system, and a huge, very important thing for District 12, actually, where my buddy Juan Miguel Martinez is currently running for the county board right now. And the domes are incredibly important for all of those reasons. And the price tag, I know, has folks intimidated, but just the other day, the most recent numbers that I got are that the capital campaign is supposed to raise 13 million and that the county is supposed to contribute 13 million to that overall plan. By the way, I do support the comprehensive plan, not just to rebuild and repair the domes and the concrete and the glazing specifically, but for this broader comprehensive project that could bring in hundreds of good union jobs, that could bring more attention, programs like urban agriculture. All of that is really, really important. And it's tremendously sad, frankly, that legislators are even talking about letting this real treasure for the South Side close just because they don't have the political will for fight for money on the inside. And I'm going to use that number again. 13 million is certainly smaller than 45 million, which the county did give to the public museum last week. So again, this is a question of where are we investing our dollars, and do we actually have the money in order to provide things people care about, not the will? And the answer to that question, I would say, is certainly yes. So I would definitely posit myself as the pro-domes candidate here. I care very strongly about repairing and expanding the site. And I think it's so important that we have it. And I think it's important for an equity perspective, for an ecological perspective, environmental perspective, that we have to keep that open, functioning, and be investing in it.
Thank you. Sheldon?
You know, the domes, let's talk about the domes. You know, I think it's, you know, the domes are nice. You know, I visit the domes. I've been to the domes. I like the domes. But the question is, and of course, we just spent $45 million on the public museum, but it was part of a huge partnership. The problem that we've had with the domes is we have had, let's look at historically what's taken place. We had a domes task force that met for 3.5 years trying to come up with a plan. They come up with a plan, they hire a consultant for $350,000 for this consultant. The consultant presents their vision of how to save the domes and the Mitchell Park domes. And what happened? The Office of Corporation Counsel looked at it and said, legally, this doesn't make sense. The comptroller's office looked at it and says, we have a problem here. This plan by this consultant really has some problems, has holes in it. We can't put all these revenues together to solve the problem. So the Office of Corporation Counsel said, we need to have outside legal expertise to look at this plan. So they hired additional lawyers to look at the plan. The comptroller's office had to hire additional people to look at the plan. And right now, the plan, their revision of the plan to save the domes is now done, but they haven't revealed it to us. We asked in Parks the other day, they will not reveal it until May. We don't have a real plan. And the other part of the problem with the domes is there's not a single corporation that's supporting the domes. There's not a single, the friends groups have never been able to raise money for the domes. So this private partnership, we don't have. And we're looking for some way to save it. So the devil's in the details, but it can't all come from the county.
Okay, thanks. So question for Sheldon. How well managed are the Milwaukee County Jail and House of Corrections? What changes, if any, are needed? And would you favor the restoration of in-person visits?
Well, let's start with in-person visits. In-person visits are critical. As COVID numbers go down, we're very fortunate. The pandemic can come back. We can always get another version, a variant of COVID, but we need to have people see their loved ones. I mean, it's just essential. When you're detached and you're removed from family, you're removed from friends, you lose your humanity. So we have to have in-person visitation. The second thing of all is in terms of video calls, there's been a big issue of video calls. I want those video calls to be free. I want to do it in a manner that makes sense. And I did take a vote to say, let's keep the current process in place, but let's transition to free video calls so people can once again be in contact with their loved ones. The other thing I want to talk about is what we've been able to accomplish with Sheriff Ernell Lucas. I think the sheriff has done a spectacular job. What he has done for our sheriff's office, and I don't mean to say this with any disrespect, but I've been there for years watching what's taken place in their sheriff's office and the neglect of prisoners and the neglect of healthcare for prisoners. People have died in our prisons. But for the first time ever, we have the National Commission of Correctional Healthcare Accreditation. This is such a feather in the cap for Milwaukee County jails. we're finally giving good health care to inmates who have a constitutional right to health care. They're the only parts of our society that have a constitutional right because the Supreme Court has ruled it. We're finally doing the right thing for our prisoners, providing the health care for them. So the jails are much better than they were.
Thank you. Eric?
Well, pardon me for not breaking into applause over that accreditation. It's incredibly troubling that there was a time that the county jail was not providing adequate health care to people in our care. That is horrific. And I am very, very nervous to hear that you were so dismissive of the fact that was ever a reality. There are some disparities between the House of Corrections and the county jail. Incarceration, I am not sold as a solution for public safety. And it was really frustrating to listen to you, Supervisor Wasserman, say all that about visitation and then voting for Supervisor Rowland's amendment anyway to punt that process down. There was no need procedurally to do that. That was just lack of willpower right there. And it's not surprising that the House of Corrections is much more humane, and that is because it's run under the county board. And I have severe concerns about the jail. It is run and administered by Arnell Lucas, our sheriff. And if I, a random person off the street, have a story of being brutalized by the sheriff's office, I'm deeply concerned that people in Milwaukee County's care are being treated well. I have heard stories time and time again. And I have deep concerns about what's happening in the county jail and in the House of Corrections. This is a priority for me, is that people in our care are treated with dignity and respect, and not just because it's a moral thing, but because that actually makes sure that we're safe, right? Locking people up and treating them as terribly as we can on as limited of a budget as possible is not making more people safe. What's making people safe is rehabilitation, job training, addiction care, things like that. Actually letting families speak to their loved ones while they're away so that that connection is not broken, and so that, by the way, they don't have to go into credit card debt in order to do it, is incredibly important. These are some very basic steps.
Thank you. Moving to an entirely different topic, and I guess, Eric, you're taking this first. Is Mitchell International Airport living up to its potential?
Sure.
How might it be improved, and would you favor privatizing it?
Oh, I would not favor privatizing it. I know that the county has very limited dealings in the way that we deal with the airport. Actually, very realistically, I was just digging through some of that data and what the county had recently done. I understand that there are now hiring bonuses to help keep workers keeping the airport function. I think that's really important. Uplifting and protecting essential workers is really, really important to making sure that the airport is functional and that all county services are functional, right? I also read that there was some plans to remove one of the runways and to improve the infrastructure that we are using. And I know that there are discussions of changing what the airport looks like as far as logistics go. But I definitely, and this is a general answer overall, privatization is not the answer, right? Adding a middleman whose job is to make profit off of all of us is certainly not making us any more efficient as a county. So I really appreciate that you phrased the question in that way.
Thank you. Sheldon?
One thing I have to go back to, and I take real strong issue on this thing, I have never been dismissive of healthcare. As a practicing OBGYN physician, I've dedicated my life to helping others, and I dedicated my life during my youth. I was in medical school, I did residency. So anybody say I was dismissive of healthcare is, I really want to, that's like hitting a nerve with me. So just because they're in prison does not mean that, or in jails or any other correctional facility does not mean they were dismissive. I fought for years in the legislature. I fought for years on the county board with different sheriffs over the years in different ways to make sure that healthcare is provided to those who need it. So I just want to respond to that. Now, as for privatization of the Mitchell Airport, we never have to do that because we have a successful airport because we have absolutely no tax revenue going into it. All the revenue and all the expenses are handled from program revenue. Basically, it's coming from the airlines are paying for it. The food service operators are paying for it. The vendors, all of it is being paid for. We actually had the shelters, the hangars. I'm sorry for the word there. The hangars. All these pay for the airport operation. So there's no need for privatization of the airport. It runs efficiently. And we're finally getting back to pre-pandemic levels. we just set the record with 28 flights to Florida for spring break. That sets a new record. Our numbers are going up. I think the key thing right now is don't go down to Chicago to fly out of Milwaukee, support our local airport, and we can have more service in the future if you do that.
Thank you. Next question for Sheldon. Milwaukee County is one of 7 counties in the Milwaukee 7 Economic Development Partnership. Is M7 working? Is it delivering enough for this county, and how might it be improved?
Yeah. You know, M7 is it has a lot of, it's great for communication on the executive level. There's, you know, some of the county board members talk to the other county board members, but there's limited interaction. And it's really, we don't have a metropolitan area. You go to other parts of the country, you know, you have metropolitan areas where communities and counties are all brought together to share resources. You know, we have SEWRPAC, which shares resources. We have a limited on the North Shore with the North Shore firefighters have resources together. You have some health departments that share resources together, but we really don't share resources. The Milwaukee County Transit crosses over on 124th Street, and all of a sudden they're in Waukesha, and they have to turn around right on 126. You know, we don't go that far. We have some bus service out, you know, that goes down to leaves the county, but it's very limited. And I think it would be wonderful to have an expansion. We're also dealing with the state with regard to their interest in trying to build bonds is really not there. There's a lot of, it's a silo approach. You know, you cross 124th Street, you're in Waukesha County. You cross north into Ozaukee County, there's another problem there. So, you know, there should be definitely more regionalization. I strongly support it. I think it should be encouraged by the state. There should be financial credits for counties that do this, but it's totally underused. The only big usage of it was for the county sales tax for the Milwaukee County Stadium. That was kind of forced upon some counties that fought hardcore against it, but we can do something with it. We should promote regionalization.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. As far as the M7 goes specifically, I can't really comment. I'm not tremendously familiar with all the exact parties and what the communication is. I think that Supervisor Wasserman is right on the money overall, and I apologize if my coughing interrupted you. I tried really hard for it not to. But I also think that we need to go back to basics here a little bit and acknowledge just some basic realities about why there is such a need to attract business into the area. And the reality is that we're still reeling from the wounds of Act 10, and that we were a state that had a tremendously strong labor movement and still do. I'm very thankful to the union organizers and the unions that are continuing to do good work here. But the reality is we have seen serious erosion of industries. We have seen serious loss of industry to overseas shipping and such. We have not seen an increase in the minimum wage, and all of those things together, while we have such a cost of living increase right now, is making it very difficult, frankly, for people to even be able to afford to live around here. It's actually, the affordability is part of what attracted me to this region in the first place. I love Milwaukee. I love Milwaukee County. I wouldn't want to be spending, you know, my life right now anywhere else. But we need to acknowledge that actually making working people's lives better is going to be part of what attracts people here in the first place, right? And so that's why I get back to basics like this about things like the transit system and about things like wages for county employees, is because that really matters. And the more power and the more money is circulating through working people, the more healthy economy we will have, the more money people will be able to have to spend on things, the more freedom people will be able to have to start a business, get a degree, get the skills that they need in order to make this place the economy that it is right now. So I think that going back and standing strong with the labor movement and doing everything we can to make sure working people get their slice of the pie is going to do wonders, really, for making sure this region is a place where everyone can live and work happily.
I want to just return to the issue of the sheriff's budget, since that's something, Eric, you've made a very large thing about. So the sheriff's doesn't really do much actual policing
Right.
in the streets. It staffs the jail, the courts, house correction, patrols the freeways. How much, and perhaps the two of you could just do 1 minute on this, but I'd like to ask you, Eric, how much do you think the county budget, sheriff's budget, can be cut, and how that would work out practically and then Sheldon, you could answer. So I'll give you a minute on that, Eric.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for that question. And thank you for contextualizing what the sheriff actually does, because there was some scaremongering very early on in the campaign that I wanted to take sheriffs away from the trails and the parks so that everyone would be vulnerable. We have parks rangers to do that work. We don't need people with guns who are proven to go out into streets and intimidate people, frankly, to be making sure that people aren't digging up buried treasure in our parks, to be completely honest. Part of the reason that I struggle to answer specifics of this question is the sheriff is very opaque about where his money is even going. And that budget is very not transparent. So one of the first things that I want to do is call for a full audit of their budget so we can actually get a sense of where the money is going, and actually make some very realistic, pragmatic decisions about what is being spent where, making sure that we're fulfilling our obligation to the state and making sure that not a dollar more than is necessary is going to them, because they're not keeping us safe. Mental health services are keeping us safe. Affordable housing is making us safe. A strong park system is making us safe. And we need to be centering those investments all the time, because those are the things that are proven to actually make sure that people are happy and not committing crimes, in their communities.
Sheldon?
I also want to add to one other responsibility the sheriff has in Milwaukee County that no other county in the state of Wisconsin has. Every other county in the state of Wisconsin has the state patrol patrolling their highways and their freeways. Milwaukee County, by state law, has to do it themselves. We don't get money from the state for doing this. It's another one of these mandates on us that is not fair. It's an unfunded mandate. I wish we did get money from the state to do it, but we patrol the freeways and the highways. We patrol the Hone Bridge, and we take care of the drunk drivers off the roads. The DUIs in Milwaukee County are terrible. The sheriff's deputies are first on it. And going back to the mental health issue, I did a sheriff's ride-along one time, a few months ago. And right in the middle of the sheriff's ride-along, we had to rush to Hone Bridge because there was a potential suicide. Right now, the Hone Bridge is the #1 source of suicides in Milwaukee County. And the sheriff's deputies do everything they can and have training what to do if they have a suicide watch. So we raced over to the Hone Bridge. Luckily, what we found a car that actually broke down. The person was just sitting along the side. They were not going to jump, but the deputy was already calling up for mental health services, was ready on the line to save lives. But we have a problem there.
Thank you. I'll give you each 1 minute more to talk about your opponent and what do you think is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponent? And I guess, Sheldon, we'll start with you.
Well, I think, I think the question almost says, I think when two people are, running for one position, it's very easy to denigrate or to, rip apart or to do that. And I don't think that's fair. I think in a democracy, I really want to applaud Eric Rorholm for making the run. It's a lot of people say, hey, don't run against an incumbent. So I give him credit. This is something he believes in and he's passionate on, but he shares a belief system that I don't share. I'm a Democrat. I'm a strong Democrat. And I think that I'm also a practical Democrat. I'm a practical progressive. I like getting things done, but I like doing them. I don't go for perfect. I go for incremental changes if I can. If I can get more things done, I will go for it. But sometimes I want to have a bird in the hand versus two in the bush. I think it's too easy for people to go on these tangents, and I want to get things done. I ran for office to make a difference. We have huge potential ahead of us. We have a forensic science laboratory that's going to be built that I want to be involved with. I'm working right now with Marciella Nicholson in a unique partnership that we may build the very first non-physical building, but we're going to be working with the poor, providing services, not with them getting on buses and taking their families, standing in line downtown.
Thank you, Sheldon.
Oh, let me give 1 second. Standing downtown, but we're going to be giving the internet to them. We're going to use the Milwaukee Public Libraries. We're going to use cell phones. Almost everybody has their cell phone. We're going to allow people to sign up for services that they need. Mental health services, food services, online. So we have a unique partnership. These are the things I want to do in the future. There's a lot of things to do, and we can make a difference for our whole community.
Okay, Eric, I'll give you 2 minutes because that's what Sheldon took.
Sure.
That's
I
fair.
appreciate you not tearing me to shreds right in front of you, Supervisor Wasserman. I appreciate that. I would encourage you to look a single mother making $7.25 an hour about to be evicted from their home if incremental change is good enough, and see what the answer you'll get is. The answer is that incremental change is crushing class people, and that's just the fundamental reality. I am deeply I've heard lots of great things, Dr. Wasserman, about your medical practice. I've heard lots of great things about you as a guy. Apparently, you're lots of fun. That's awesome. We should get a drink sometime. But I am deeply dissatisfied with your record as a supervisor. I am very, very nervous about our park system. And I have been very sad, frankly, to see that it has continued to decay. I think that there were some hidden jabs at socialism, so I'll just come out and say it. I'm a proud democratic socialist. I'm someone who came to the democratic socialist movement through the Bernie campaign, and that was a campaign all about lifting up working people, whether you were gay, no matter what your race was, whether you were young or old or what, and saying you have some basic fundamental inalienable rights here, and there is a political class of people who are fundamentally not making that a reality for you. I'm not a millionaire. I'm certainly not a landlord. I'm not a doctor. I am a renter. I am someone who worked for $7.25 to pay the bills. Make a little bit more than that now, not tremendously well. I only just started going to see a primary care physician this year because I only just got insurance again this year. I went over a year through the pandemic without any health insurance at all. I understand what working class people's lives are like, and people have shared a lot of their experiences with me. And I am very, very adamant that working class people deserve a voice and a perspective to be heard. This district has a reputation for being very affluent. It has a reputation for being a little out of touch, but tucked between all of the skyscrapers and the mansions, there's a lot of working class people living, scrubbing the tables and being the bartenders, being the servers, teachers, custodians, bus operators. All of those folks live in this district here. And I share their perspective. Their struggle is the reason that I'm running this race in the first place. And that's why I'm running to do as much as we can do for Milwaukee County and be making sure that nobody will ever face violence from the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department, and be making sure that we're spending our limited money in a very fiscally responsible, people first way.
Thanks, Eric. Well, we're at 7:59, so I could give each of you like one more minute to summarize why you think we should vote for you.
Well,
Sheldon, I'll give you one more minute.
all right, I'd like to take that on right away. First of all, when we talk about millionaires and all the rest and landlords, I am not a landlord, and I've been accused of this landlord. My wife runs a business, and she's in a male-dominated world, a male-dominated business, and I find it somewhat sexist for everybody to say, "Oh, the husband must be irresponsible." You know, in a lot of families have two different working spouses. I mean, I'm not responsible for her business, and she's not responsible for mine. My name's on the ballot, and I just want to make that clear, point blank. The other thing is, as for working, I've been a physician who worked very hard in my life. I worked 80 hours a week to sometimes 90 hours, but I never was given a golden spoon starting with. My first job was a dishwasher. I worked for $2 an hour. My first raise was a nickel. My second job was I became a short order cook, and then I became a lifeguard. I was told if I didn't get a job at 16, you are out of the house. So let's talk about where people come from. I came from very humble means. My family, I had a single mother raised me, and I'm proud of my mother. So I don't want anyone to assume that, oh, this is kind of like accusations have been made, oh, you have money and all the rest of stuff. No, I've worked every single dime, for every dollar, and for something. And I've given my time and my energy for it. So the silver spoon approach really kind of bothers me. I've heard it through this campaign. So I just want to clarify that point blank, since I just heard it. So thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate your time again. Thank you so much for being willing to have me. I've worked with over a dozen progressive campaigns and organizations to make Wisconsin a better place. I am a climate activist. I am a strong supporter of a Green New Deal, and I'm someone who's been really excited to work with unions and work with progressive organizations and talk to lots of folks on the ground about the things that we can do here in Milwaukee County. And the reality is that people are excited about repairing their park system, and they're very excited about having a functional transit system. And in this moment where democracy is in a moment of crisis, right? I think it's more important than ever that people have representatives that look like them, that live like them, that earn like them, that have careers like them. And so I'm very grateful to all of y'all who have been willing to sit and listen to me tonight. I appreciate you supporting this run. It's hard to run as a young person for office for lots of different reasons. So it's been a really incredible experience. We've made lots of fantastic connections along the way. And I'm very thankful for the coalition that we've built so far. I'm proud to be endorsed by Wisconsin Working Families Party, Citizen Action of Wisconsin, Milwaukee DSA, the Milwaukee Area Labor Council, the Milwaukee Teachers Education Association. And I'm really excited to take this momentum we have and to do some really incredible things on the county board. And I also want to take this time to say there are some issues with the absentee ballots. My last name is not spelled right. So and my name's been spelled wrong all kinds of places this campaign. So however my last name is spelled on your ballot, I'm the candidate that's going to fight for working people. So thank you so much for being willing to have me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That ends our forum. I'd like to thank everyone who attended virtually, and be sure to vote. And thank you very much to the candidates for your thoughtful and interesting exchange.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.